Two DMs with years of experience. One of us planned and the other didn't. What could go wrong on this episode of the Vanguard Chronicles? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vanguard Chronicles podcast, where we have an ongoing conversation into the creative process between our our 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign, known as the Vanguard, at Sonora Tavern. I'm one of your hosts and one of the Dungeon Masters, Nathan Sims, as always joined by my co-host, Shawn. We also go by Spark, Ascendant, and General Grom. And before we get started, we actually want to talk about a really exciting charity that we've begun to support. Many people have heard of it. It's called Extra Life.
Yeah, it's a charity. It's a group. We decided that we wanted to support a charity, so we put it as a vote, and Extra Life was the charity we fell upon. It supports Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. It's a really good charity, and it's good for kids. So if you're interested, there's a QR on the screen, as well as go to Extra Life. I think it's extralife.org, but Nathan knows a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that would be the QR code's on the screen if you're watching the YouTube. Also, the we'll have the links in the description. It's also up, but it's extralife.org. That's extra-life.org. And then from there, just search for the Vanguard, and you'll be able to find us pretty easily. So we're going to support, in particular, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and yeah, we're really excited about it. So please, if you can, please donate. That being said, I know I say this every episode, and we're on the 4th episode, but Shawn, I'm really excited about this episode.
I am excited as well. We're finding a groove.
Yeah, and well, also I've got a couple particulars on this one, but so last time when we met, we're still, as we're through these early episodes, we've been trying to recap kind of the general history of the Vanguard, or at least how it kicked off and how we got ourselves going, and kind of got ourselves really building this groups into what it is now and today, with all the players we have, and having to literally have people reserve their slots in advance because we sell out on our free tickets every single month. But in this time, we're going to talk about, in particular, our second session that we did, because, well, I think we'll let people see exactly how both of our second sessions went in just a little bit. But Shawn, it was a while ago, because it was April, I believe. So what do you remember from our second session?
Well, yeah, let me see. Not much. No, I do remember kind of how it went. The first session was eye opener, and then the second session we had a lot more people. We had 4 tables. All 4 DMs were being tasked to pull their games together, and that was a new kind of challenge to sort the room out, make sure everybody had space to play, and they could order food and drink, and it would be a fun evening. But that was the challenge, was because the room configuration is not that big where we were. But I do remember that that was fun. That added to a very fun and a very interesting night all the way around, because we had 4 adventures going. It was the first time that had ever happened.
And just one more time, I think, to retouch, because we're still in the early days, but that's 4 adventures. So that's 4 tables, 4 DMs, 4 different one-shots, each written by those DMs. Yep. Every one of them having to continue the story from the 2 sessions you and I ran in the previous month.
Right. But also you have to realize, to a large degree, everything was just getting off the ground. We had just started to say, well, let's see how we do this. What kind of mechanics work? What kind of common mechanics work between the 2 of us? Was a challenge in itself.
It's really funny. Ryan and I our producer Ryan and I, of course, make the joke these days, what are we doing? I think if there were a hold your beer moment, it's really what were we doing was really those early days compared to now. This feels organized.
Yes, I know this. That is absolutely true. This feels very organized compared to where we started, which was extremely off the hip. Let's see if it works. Sure, why not? Let's see how that goes. And I don't think we had a lot of stumbles. We had a few. We had some complaints about noise and not getting enough service because there were too many of us talking at once. all those little things like that. But I thought overall the experience was growing, and people felt like we were trying our best, and we were giving them a lot more than they expected.
Interesting thing about running a bar that I had never known before is obviously, right, you come and I'm DM, so I get to be a table hog. So I have, maps sometimes, got my DM screen, got like 3 spiral notebooks, 5 books that I pull whatever my stat blocks are from. And of course, people have their minis and their dice trays, and then the appetizers or beers hit the table, and you realize like,
Right.
running a bar game's a little bit different.
Right. There's space needs are different at your table than they are. Well, depending, you have a lot bigger table at home than you might have in a tavern. And these tables weren't what I would call huge, but they were accommodating. She was great at Sonora was great at making sure that if we needed something or if we tried something, she was totally open for us to kind of do what we wanted and make it as accommodating for our players as we possibly could, which I thought we did a good job of.
Well, they were figuring out this thing too, because right, for anyone who tries to replicate this, be it at a bar or anywhere else, like your venue in some way will need to accommodate you. And Sonora being an active tavern and restaurant, I know another challenge just out of the gate in the early days was you have wait staff coming to collect orders. And boy, fewer things disorient me as a GM more than someone who's not involved in the game. And no shade on any of the servers at Sonora. They're wonderful. They're awesome. This is not me complaining in any way. It's a weird situation that you don't think of in a home game, but you have someone whose job is literally to come and talk to all your players and take them out of the game to have a separate conversation about it. And it completely throws you off the first time.
Absolutely. You have to almost work it in to your one shot, a moment where, okay, if you guys want drinks, this would be the time to get them, kind of thing. And I think I've actually had that moment and used that as a moment in the game to either for myself to take a quick break to look something up or make sure I'm on track with something. So I think it's a two-way street, and it's a good mechanism to use if you really, if you need it. And now it's different because you just go to the straight up to the bar and order from there because of the situation and our size. So that changed a couple of things.
Or if you're like me last session, you have one of your players who's going to the bar anyway,
Courier,
get you a beer.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with it.
No, not at all.
I was actually sitting, and you did this as well, sat at the bar and played a game from behind the bar. That was kind of fun.
Yeah,
that's a cool spot. That's a cool spot, I have to admit.
That's the secret technique.
Like that. That was fun. That was very fun.
Yeah, but,
it was. Before we get into the session, our next, because as we kind of progress through this, we had just established what the houses were doing, and people start to buy into, these houses are a legitimate function of the guild. And that was nice because now everyone had a little bit more story depth, and a little bit more toys in the toy box, so to speak, to tell stories.
Yeah, you were just starting to cook on the houses idea too. I believe also just as other little small things to bring people in. You had they printed out the modified menu. So it was all the things they were serving at Sonora too, but yeah, it was in a different font. Yeah, so it was an actual tavern menu. I forget if that was the first night they played music too. World of Warcraft theme showed up.
Yeah, I think that was the first time we played music while we were getting set up and getting ready to play. And yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of funny. I took their menu and from online, and it took me a while, but I renamed all the food based on stuff from our universe and our world, which I thought was kind of clever, and they loved it. Sonora thought it was great. Is the gumbo is General Grom's gumbo? I was like, that's perfect.
Right. That's right.
Perfect.
So we had, obviously, the bar's getting used to it. We're getting used to it. We're getting some of our stories together, and of course, that's right. We had 4 DMs, which 4 DMs, God, if we had 4 VMs, then like God, that we
thought we were kings, okay? Because we have 4 DMs, nobody was overloaded, everything was rolling. We were
5
like,
players at my table.
Right. Solid. We were like, this is great. Let's just do this all the time. We felt like we had solved.
And from what I understand,
just to think about it makes me laugh. It's like there's no way we solved that problem like we think we did.
And from what I understand, it sounds like the other 2 DMs might have been more prepared for this session than you or I was, which is kind of the point of what we're going to get to in this one. Is we want to go through for this episode some of the details of how we ran our second session, because I think it's a really cool pivotal point, because we weren't both running stuff we had really prepped. This was the first actual, I think, trial run of what, from a DM perspective, the challenge is of, again, new session every month. Don't know who your player count's going to be. Don't know the levels. Don't know all of these unknowns, and having to write this one shot that can be played in this very variable setting and context. And I think this was really the first time where we both had to meet that challenge. And from what I understand, well, as we were talking about it in the background, I realized that there's actually some I might be calling the kettle black a little bit with this one when I bring up some of your stuff. But before we dig into yours and mine, what do you remember about the other two sessions? Because I gotta be honest, I don't remember much from this. I remember the key details in your notes, but I'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah, Brian was the first game I believe he ran. Was the first one shot that he had written that he didn't get to play the week before or the month before, because we didn't have enough players, so he got to play. So his adventure was called Rhekiel's Rest, and Rhekiel was a mage who had passed away, but was also kind of he kept track of a lot of lore, and he had a tome which held all the information he had collected throughout his entire life about Neuraxis. And the adventure was for the group to go get this tome and return it to the guild for safekeeping. And that was Rhekiel's Rest. And we all talk about it now, as even though it was Brian's first one, it became it created so many other tangible storylines from it that other DMs decided to take and run adventures with as we had new guys come aboard. So that was really fun. And then Rich ran an adventure called the Stolen Jewel, which is really kind of a play on words because Jewel is a person. And in that storyline, the Jewel was kidnapped on purpose. She wanted to be kidnapped and to take the ransom, and so they were kind of double crossing the players into her rescue. Wasn't really a rescue. It was just an attempt for them to get the ransom money and give to her and her father, who was the Lagrange. I think it was Frito Lagaine. That's what it was. Yeah, Frito Lagaine, and he was a well-established businessman, but it was also a little shady. So it was a little bit of a backstabbing from the daughter to the father in his story. But the characters liked it, and he had a good full table as well. So those two were the other ones.
And before I forget, wasn't that Brian's first session of D&D?
As I said, it was Brian's first session as a DM. He had a pretty good story. We had talked a bit before he ran it, so I knew how he was getting prepared, and he also knew that at any given time during his gameplay that if you had a question, just you reach out and yell to us.
I did the same thing.
It's just a game. Like, come on, relax. So yeah, everybody seemed to enjoy his game, and he had a great time running it. So yeah, Rhekiel's Rest was Brian first game, not only as a DM but first game for the Vanguard. And Rich, that was his one. Stolen Jewel was his first one as well, but not the first game he had ever run. I think he had DM before.
Right. Well, I don't remember much of theirs, but I definitely remember the conversation we had going into it about your session. Do you remember what?
No. It goes down fondly. It's a fond memory of what it takes to prep to be a DM. It was a little bit of an eye opener for me. Like, you can't just wing it. You can't, but I did.
Story time. I'm standing there. I come into the bar at this point. It's our second time doing it, and I'm trying to engage with the players more. I'm like shifting back into my old college club president days of engage with every person, make them feel welcome, make small talk, because I've left that life. Right, I'm no longer in college. I graduated not that long ago. But anyway, I left that, and I haven't been in that way in a while. So I've become much more insular, as I now pay rent. And then and so I'm doing my thing. I'm trying to engage with people. I'm getting out my notes. I'm thinking through everything, seeing anything I need to jot down. And this genius comes up to me with his spiral notebook held close to his chest and says, do you want to see what I'm running? And I'm like, yeah, sure, Shawn, what are you running? And you show me a blank notebook page absolutely no notes, nothing at all. And Lily like, this is what I'm thinking of running tonight.
Yeah. I said, I want to see my prep, and you were like, yeah, I want to see it now. I walked over and I was like, ha, 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 ha. And then that was best part about that is your reaction. First of all, you looked at me, then you looked at my notes, then you looked back at me, looked at my notes, and you looked at them, and you're like, I don't know how you're gonna pull that off. So I had them; they were set up from the beginning. I had no idea what they were doing. But that being said, it wasn't completely made up. It wasn't 100% made up. There was a premise, and I did have a bad guy that I wanted to try to introduce into the storyline, and I'll get to that real quick. Called Whisper's Breath, and they were a Fey Assassins Guild that lives in the Feywild that takes contracts from nefarious people all throughout the Fey realm, the Forgotten Realms. And what makes them unique is that they're miniaturized. They're the size of ants, and they ride miniaturized. They ride insects as means of travel, but they can enlarge for a very short period of time, steal what they want, grab what they want, and then shrink back and take off with it. And that's kind of what makes them so dangerous. In that, as a clan, and I use the term death by 1,000 paper cuts. So that was the bad guy idea, is that these guys went and stole this thing called the Crown of Reversal. It was held by Zephyr Malefax, and he was just kind of a goofy wizard NPC character that was forgetful and had created all these systems to somehow protect this crown, but they got through it. So it extends from this idea that I started with was, Honey, I Shrunk the Adventurers. So I thought
Cool.
that'd have been kind of funny. Like, what would happen if we miniaturize them and I put them into this? They have to now go find this, and they have a time limit, and they have to come back so they can be re-enlarged by the wizard. Of course, hopefully find the crown. And with that, I got a chance to have them play in the Feywild for a bit as they go in and tackle what I had them do to try to find the Crown of Reversal.
Kudos for that, because like I think every single session I've run has taken place in the material plane. I haven't run a single one that's gone out of it. And that's something I know I struggle with as a DM sometimes, especially at lower levels, to find ways to pull players into different realms. It's D&D is best, I think, when it's weird, because you dive, or at least weird in that you dive into the imaginary and the ways in which it's different and unique and kind of stands out. And one of the easy ways to do that is throw people to a different plane. But Dawg, other planes are scary and really deadly. Really deadly.
And obviously to motivate them to go where they, in the right direction, or at least start in the right direction. I just had a stampede of rats, just normal rats, but to them they were freaking huge, and they would just come running through where they're at. Like, we got to go. Like, yeah, you might want to not stand here.
Do you remember the stat block you used for the rats? I have to.
It was the standard stat block. I mean, it wasn't. I didn't change them and make them like huge or anything. But to them, the characters wouldn't fight them. Cool. To them, they look huge. They're like, I'm not messing with that. And I think I maybe have added a D6 and bludgeoning damage if they got trampled by one. But I didn't really give them much more juice. I just made them intimidating by size. So that's how I played that into it. And then I got them going, and they found their way. Actually, they found a young Fey creature that they never really asked much more about, but she was really the foil in a lot of my adventures, and I write them as 3-act plays. Even if I'm making it up or trying to adapt, there's an exposition dump in the beginning. I enjoy that. Okay, I'm going to fill you in with some of the information about the world you're in, what's happening, what could be happening, what might be happening, and then let them kind of filter out the call to action part of that adventure, which they still know what they have to do, which is go find the Crown of Reversal. It allowed me to use it as a way to find another hook that I could use later. And that was the third act, was not only resolving them finding the Crown of Reversal and fighting the Feywild, the Whisper's Breath creatures, but it was also finding another element for the story, in this case, a ledger. And that ledger, at the point I had nothing to do, I just knew it was a ledger.
That's where the ledger came from.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't listened,
you see the look on his. I don't want to stop you. Look on his face is exactly what I'm talking about when it connected one shots. That's the look players get when they go, "Oh, that was in another adventure." Not to cut you off, but go ahead. That's the point I was trying to make.
That's so wild for me, because yeah, so people who are listening, I reacted really wide in the exact way that, yes, our players do react. And it's because I know that that ledger has played a very big role in our story because I have used it as a plot hook for half of my sessions moving forward. I was like, hey, Shawn, didn't you have like some kind of ledger they found? Like, yeah, what's in the ledger? I don't know. What do you want to put in it, Nathan? Cool. Like that's I've used that ledger
Mm-hmm.
so much for plot hooks moving forward. Just
Absolutely.
goes to show just one of the ways that, and again, how you address one of the challenges we've had too, which is leaving those kind of open-ended clues there in your adventures, such that
Right.
instead of it being like, this is a ledger, it has these 5 names for these characters, and I've written all the background, it was just an object that they found. And then I, as another DM, was able to come and say, hey, this is left open-ended. Like, can I keep carrying this thread a little forward? And then, cool, good. Wow.
Well, if you really think about it, the ledger is the reason we found out who they were, who the name of the it's connected to the end point of how we found out who our adversary was. At that
Right.
point, we did not know, but the ledger is a connected dots. It is also the beginning seed of how we find out where Neuraxis is because it's
That
connected to Ash
ledger,
Valen. It's
that
very,
let
very pivotal.
that ledger is also led to intercepting an assassination plot that got us embroiled with the hags. I don't want to go too deep into this because, like, for people who are just listening, we just
For new
rattled
starts,
off a
there's
bunch of stuff. Yeah,
right.
anyone who's listening, or if you follow in 10 episodes down the road, come back to this episode because we'll have talked about some of these things. You'll be like, "Oh my god, the ledger," and then you'll react in the same way that I did.
And sequentially too, our players who hopefully will be listening, those that do come to our game be listening. Yes, that ledger that you found has been very pivotal to everything else we've done. So yes, I enjoy it.
Yeah,
That's where that came from. The ledger was found. The Crown of Reversal was just kind of a MacGuffin. It really didn't have a lot of I wouldn't have called it. It didn't have a lot of narrative weight to me. It was just an object they needed to find. The ledger became way more flexible
right.
in other storytelling.
So I have to ask because I know I'll be talking about it when I come around, but when you ran this, since you obviously were so well prepped and had every NPC's name written down and every
Right.
map drawn and all your minis painted in the in not at all. Um, what did you have any moments that occurred during that like just threw you off guard, took your already barely laden plans and then said, cool, they're even more useless now, and even threw you off entirely?
Well, didn't account for animal handling checks of 2 natural 20s in a row. So I gave them, well, they were fighting the Whisper's Breath, and some of the Whisper's Breath, they ride the infantry or the fighter, melee fighters ride ants. They on the back of they ride them as mounts, and they fight from that position. So, and they can climb walls, and it makes them a little more agile and a little more fun as an adversary. And Vahorn, Allura knocked him off with a very skillful arrow shot, knocked the rider off the back of and quickly said, I want to try to animal handle this ant. And he did. So we got, I mean, the DC was super high. I mean, it's a creature that's connected to the Feywild. And it was like, so this is not what I expected, but you got to roll. And he rolled nat 20. And I was like, okay. And I expected, fine, I'll let you, boom, you jump on his back. You really got a handle on it. And he turned around. It was like, charge. And he went right into it and started tearing it up. Now, here's the funny part. I said, okay. Now,
We're already at the funny part.
First time he takes damage, I'm going to make him roll again. This thing's going to buck him. He rolls another nat 20. And I'm like, at that point, I said, what's his name? He goes, Antony. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Jesus.
So I let him have it. And now I did tell him that he's one of our veteran players. He's a great guy, really, really fun player. But I did tell him after the fact when he exited, he had Antony. He was riding Antony out with the Crown of Reversal in the ledger,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't really prepare for him to get it re-enlarged and now bring it back to the guild as this giant mount. So I did tell him, I didn't let him keep it. At the end, I said that because the ant is a hive creature and it's from the Feywild, it's going to want to return. And after a certain amount of time, it's going to shrink back to its normal size and find its way. So you can't have it. Yes, I realized that would have been bad.
God,
But
that's
that's
another
the
challenge we
I
have.
did not handle that. I didn't expect to have to handle it that way.
Well, because that's another challenge we have too. Because even these are
True.
still in the early days where like progression isn't we haven't nailed out rules for progression yet. So any money they find, any magical items, like a lot of the things that you expect in a typical D&D adventure, and in a one shot, who cares? You know, oftentimes one shots are not progressed from. So I can give you a gajillion gold, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to
Right.
come back to it. We're not going to play these characters again. But in this case, these one shots have to progress. So yeah, you can't. Anyone who's watching the YouTube would have seen me react as I wondered, oh dear God, is there an ant just chilling at HQ that I didn't know about?
No, no, I had to definitely like no. I said I pulled him aside. The next session he made, I'm like, although narratively it's hilarious, it's just I can't. I said I can't do it. Sorry, and he was fine with it. He was like, great. And I was like, I'll give you a couple extra 100 gold for your troubles, and he was fine with it. So, but again, he said I have no place to spend it. I'm like, yeah, we're working on that because again, all of these challenges that started out narratively, we are now taking notes and starting to
Right.
pull them together.
Right, because the first one really was just kind of a one-off, one shot in the way I just described a second ago, but this was the first time they started to connect. Jeez.
Right. This was
What
one
were
of the
you
first times.
you were using your book of battle maps at this point, right? So you were doing mini combat.
Yeah, most of the time I like minis, so everyone I think everyone brought their own mini, but I usually at the time was using straight up just battle maps. Uh, I have so many of them over. They're just you go through all the books and like, oh, that'll suit what I'm doing.
Mhm.
So I hadn't really got into I had been making terrain for my home game, but I hadn't gotten into making terrain for this game.
God, I can't. Well, I extra can't get over the animal handling thing because I don't know if you're aware, but that was not the only nat 20 on a ridiculous animal handling check that occurred that night.
No kidding.
No, not at all. So, shall we dive into the Sunken Pyramid? The pun not
Yeah,
intended.
because I mean, mine pretty much resolved itself pretty cleanly. So yeah, the other than an ant back at HQ.
Okay, cool. So, pot calling the kettle black a little bit. When I looked at my notes actually, and for anyone who's watching, we'll have images of them pop up in a bit. But I actually did not
These are
have.
some high tech notes.
Yeah, well, they're because I use spiral notebooks, and the thing is, I looked at these notes real quick, and I'm like, is this all I had? And I remembered, oh yeah, because I didn't write down my adventures at the time. I didn't do that. I typically, especially when a one shot, because a lot of them are throwaway. Like for example, the Ruddy Moines, which we talked about 2 episodes ago, I don't have that written down anywhere, except for the little bit that's in our wiki. I have
Right.
that written nowhere because I come up with the idea in my head and then I typically run it. It's only recently for the Vanguard that I've been starting to write those down, so that way we can put them in our wiki. Which, by the way, now that's been mentioned a few times. Please feel free if you want to read more about any of these adventures, to include the ones from last time or any of the characters we have, what we're doing now, or the other adventures that happen this session. Please check it out at vanguardguild.fandom.com. Plenty to read. You can have a lot of more stories from us. But yeah, so my notes at this time, and the notes that I had scribbled in my notebook at this point, they are just on character names and what I keep track of for who my players are at the table. A couple quick drawings that I did to help illustrate things for them, and
Mm-hmm.
like a couple name things, which I'll bring up in a bit. But yeah, I did not have much. So I laughed at you for having no plan, but I mean, in my defense, I had no notes, but I did have a plan.
Okay, fair enough. How did it play out? So tell me a little bit of the story behind the Sunken Pyramid.
Yeah, so the premise we were doing is, as all, if you from last time we talked about our sessions, I try to break it up into distinct encounters that'll occur and
Mm-hmm.
memorable moments, and I try to at the time get a good balance of adventure moments, role play if possible, and especially for one shots at a bar, people come to fight. So typically, right, everybody wants to do their big combat. That
Right.
keep that in mind for later. So the premise I had come up with was, well, okay, we know we're hunting for this spear. And at this point, we'd also privately realized, okay, there's 5 keys. You and I gave away 2 of them. There are 4
Yes.
sessions running tonight. We can't all give away a key. And also, if this is going to go longer, if we have all 5 keys, it's time to do a raid on the vault. all our players haven't even leveled up once. They're all level 3. We can't keep giving out keys. Just
what kind of vault? What kind of vault would they be breaking into at their level? I mean, it would have just been whatever.
The kind you buy in the general store at Cracker Barrel. It makes like a loud noise when you open the thing. I know because I had one as a kid. You can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, it would
ambitious.
Be a mess.
No.
Very much like all D&D campaigns, very ambitious. So I decided we'll go with lore. And the way I established was a pyramid in the middle of a lake, like a big giant lake, again, out somewhere, wasn't mapping the location, just out in some forest somewhere. All of a sudden, scouts had uncovered or been digging into reports of a pyramid having surfaced from the top. And I thought, cool, middle of a forest, there's a pyramid that's also sunken under a lake. Like that doesn't make sense, right? So it's a cool, odd little piece, memorable, catchy title. It has the draw for it. So we've been sent to investigate because we believe it has some historical ties to Neuraxis, the mage killer, which again is the big spear that for the story we had established, our guild is looking for at this point.
Right. It was reestablishing it. That's exactly what you're doing.
Right.
We had told him about it, and now we're just repeating it.
Right. What was that? What were those keys even for?
Right. Was Neuraxis, the vault of Neuraxis.
Exactly.
So we just kept the smart thing, and as we described the story, it started at this point of the story, was just repeating concepts and letting them the names, because then they start to stick. It takes a while. No one gets it the first time, ever.
So one thing also that's really handy, and things I've learned in my experience, is you don't always need to put your players in danger to make them feel like they're in danger, because you see everything behind the screen. So that goes simultaneously. You know the monster around the corner that they're not expecting. You also know when they are fearing something behind the screen that is not there. So it's a really easy way to sometimes pad out and add some extra danger to a scenario, just by adding an atmosphere and a vibe. So there was just a dinghy to cross the lake and get to the pyramid that they crossed in. The big thing I described is that they went in, you have the sun's high in the sky, so it's very hot. I did describe as they got closer to the pyramid, there was a very heavy presence of bugs, insects. And in particular, I described beetles. Just a very heavy presence of beetles, large ones just kind of flying and seemed to be swarming a bit more. And as they got closer, they noticeably felt the beetles got larger. Players made investigation rolls. Players made perception checks. Players obviously kept their eyes in the murky water of the lake. They don't know if it's going to be the bugs to watch out for. They don't know if it's going to be the lake that's a problem. You put players in a dinghy and they'll feel as uncomfortable as if you and 4 friends get in a dinghy in uncomfortable waters. It's an easy way to kind of set a mood and set them on ease.
Right.
So they cross the lake, no issue. And then they get to the pyramid, which itself I described as being kind of tilted, almost like, with the terrain shifting under it for possibly hundreds of thousands of years. Its actual natural position of the pyramid, ground under it sinking. The impression I wanted to give is this pyramid has been here so long that, yeah, it looks like a desert pyramid and it's going to have the vibes of a desert pyramid. Why is it in a forest? Because it's been buried and sealed under a lake for so long, and it's only recently kind of surfaced just from natural wear.
Wow. That's awesome. I think it's a great way to set the mood, get them going, get them pointed. Environments are as a DM are priceless, I think.
Well, especially because we were still flying blind with some of our plot details yet too. So I'm like, it's going to tie to this treasure hunt in some way. And I'm like, well, treasure hunt, go Indiana Jones, right? Go kind of that classic vibe, and no better way to do it than a pyramid. So, or at least to evoke that idea. So they head in. What I described was I also like to give at the time a good encounter is a travel encounter. Like, how do we navigate just a hard thing? It's especially good at low levels because they don't have access to fly yet. They don't have access to jump. It's still in the era of grappling hooks being and hempen rope actually being worth something, because by 5th or 6th level you forget hempen rope exists.
Right. You don't need it.
Right. So I had the entrance to the tunnel to the tomb itself was kind of just at the water level. So the idea being, however it raised or whatever, the actual water is cresting at the entrance to the tunnel itself. And since the pyramid is tilted, the hallway is now basically a slide with water going all the way down to, and a steep enough drop that it's going to hurt if you go down. So they set up their rope, have somebody, I think they dig in their is it pittons or pitons? What's your verdict on it? The things you
Oh,
hammer in.
pittons.
Pittons, cool. Yeah, so hammer in their pittons. That's a good debate for comment section.
Yes, I think the comments will correct us if we're wrong. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, if you disagree, comment below.
Right.
So they hammered in the pittons, lowered themselves down, right? Made a bunch of checks because they want to be sure it doesn't drop because they don't know what's going to happen. And then as they lowered through, I also then let this be my lore dump. So I had a bunch of hieroglyphics on the walls, grand murals depicting a grand battle, hundreds of wars, hundreds of soldiers, all from different nations, all centering on a figure with a dog head. Human body, dog head. Very clearly we're doing the Anubis thing, or at least, again, evoking that imagery. And the thing I wanted to make clear, though, was I had this figure appears to have some kind of energy that is repelling all attacks to it. And critically, seems to be emanating from a glaive or a spear they are holding in hand. Listeners who are remembering that Neuraxis, the mage killer, is a spear, have by this point done the math and pieced it together. So this was the lore dump that we were giving. A couple players then made their history rolls, and I indicated, this is where I actually walked over to you. I said, hey, would it be fair to say that Neuraxis has been around for like thousands of years? Can I come up with a name real quick? You're like, yeah, that's good. Cool. So I walked back to my table and I came up with the idea. I said, so this is the temple of you based on these reports and a really high history roll. This seems to be the temple of Il Sabim Kashir was the name I came up with. Because the idea I had was, not the temple of Il Sabim Kashir, that Il Sabim Kashir was a legendary spear said to slay wizards and sorcerers. Hintity hint, Neuraxis the Mage Killer wasn't made 2 years ago. It was made hundreds of thousands of years ago. And it stands to reason that an artifact like that has passed on through generations. So generations of armies and nations have risen and fallen with this thing. So this temple would have belonged to someone who coincidentally might have at one point held the Mage Killer. And that exactly is the plot they come to.
Right.
So they get their lore dump, continue to go down to the bottom, and at the bottom, they come to the end of it. There's a chamber on the other side, but it's blocked by basically a bubble of glass. For just to make it simplistic and make my description a little bit easier, the idea I had is there's a lot of sand, and basically as what would happen if a lot of fire got thrown at a big sandstorm, all that intense heat, all that sand turns to glass, and so you basically have a glass bubble that then seals it. Players make their athletics checks, take out their pickaxes and their weapons. We had a barbarian in the crew. Barbarians do what barbarians do. Hulk smashed their way through the glass, and then they're inside. And now we're at the part that the core thing I envision. For those who remember 2 episodes ago, when I plan a one-shot, I like to plan it around a central encounter that I think was the cool one, typically from the monster manual. So they fall in. Water's now streaming in as well, too. Not so much it's going to kill them. I said there are enough cracks that the water leaks out. That's fast. But water is now coming into the space filled with sand. Basically, they're inside of an hourglass, or the bottom of an hourglass, if you will. Sand isn't streaming in. It's just there's a lot of sand around. And the idea is that there's a coffin in the middle that houses the former owner of Il Sabim Kashir, a.k.a. Neuraxis. And they're going to go check out this coffin. Enter the boss. So I, at the time, was digging through Kobold Press's Tome of Beasts. If you haven't read any of these, they're really good books. Don't just look at the imagery. The imagery is great, but actually read the stat blocks. They have a lot of cool monsters. And I found a being in there called the Anubian. I like Tome of Beasts stuff and Kobold Press stuff because a lot of their monsters are so unique that they really make good. The monster manual and the D&D stuff tend to be more generic for adventures. A lot of Kobold Press's stuff tend to be really good centerpiece monsters just because they're weird and different. So you might not throw an army of them. You can, but they're the kind of monsters that are really good at building an encounter around if you have access to it. Monster manual is still great. I just like to pull in third-party stuff sometimes too. So it was right challenge range, CR2. It's vulnerable to water, which gave me some cool ideas for water streaming in from outside. So it's a sandy thing. Now the water comes in, that creates issues. It doesn't get caught in reactions because it can travel through sand, as I recall. So it can just kind of blink through things. And also it has a really good momentous AoE ability with the fact that it can just bring in a big sandstorm. So awesome. A bunch of really cool abilities. It can teleport all over the place through the sand. I can have cool descriptions with the water, irritating it to maybe make the players break the glass, bring more water in, get really creative with it. Cool AoE visibility blocking thing. Like, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, this is a cool fight. And the idea I came with is, since it's it looks kind of like Anubis, it's called an Anubian. It's this elemental sandstorm spirit thing. I just play on the fact that since it's dog-like, it is a guardian for the tomb itself. That's what we went with. And it did its sandstorm and started the sandstorm. And poor Theron Blaze, our barbarian player, went into his rage, ready to fight. And then the druid in the party said, I cast Speak with Animals, and tried to talk with it. Oops. And I was too nice on this one. I honestly, I don't think I was too nice, but I was too nice in hindsight. So it's an elemental, not an animal, but I said, they don't know that. That doesn't mean anything to them. And also I'm describing it as being dog-like. So, hey, we'll lean to that. Sure. Speak with animals. And they basically try to talk to it to calm it down. So it's doing its like once a day, big sandstorm spellcast ability. The fight's popped off. We've had a round of combat. The Barbarians is like in and has already taken a swing and I think missed, which made the DC on the check a little bit easier too. She goes to try and calm it down. So I'm like, okay, cool. You try and calm it down, speak with animals, make the roll, animal handling, let's go. She rolls, I think, a nat 20. Cool. She tries to calm it. And at this point, when I have players doing this too, I'm like, you're in the moment. Look at me. Don't look at them. What are you saying to it right now? So we kind of give our role play through it, because I'm not going to let you talk through everybody on this. Spotlights on your character. You took it when you said I cast Speak with Animals and had the gall to roll a nat 20. You're doing
it's on
this.
you, right?
It's on you, right? I put him on the spot. And also because it helps, like, okay, you made a heroic moment. I, as the DM, have caught it, and I'm going to give it to you. Also thinking it's going to fail, but like, hey, I'm giving you the moment. Like, you've got this.
Right.
She basically rolls to ask what it wants. It says that they're intruding. Too many people have come to steal from his master. They already have stolen from his master, indicating that the spear's not here. So I'm not gonna not just give him a key. I'm also not gonna give him the spear, because that would defeat everything. Right. And she rolls it, I think, at least one more nat 20 and a couple other godlike rolls before finally becomes a full-on conversation. And she's like, okay, cool. I think at this point, actually it was Death Pain, because he was the one who ran it too, because he was the druid. At this point, he's like, hey, we don't mean to harm you. We are not looking for anything. We saw this pyramid rise. If you just want us to leave, we'll leave. And after the last successful roll, I looked over the barbarian player and I just saw the disappointment. And yeah, because he came to fight, and he really came to fight. And I was like, cool. And so I believe also our session ended before yours too, because I was like, all right, cool. Well, great. Because they rolled well. Right. Well, like, gotta give it to them. But I was like, okay, well, thanks, guys. Sorry the session was a little anticlimactic, but that was cool. Like, I had a good time.
That was the other thing too. At that point, I still kind of vaguely remember how it was important that we'd end at a certain time, because the place has hours, and we didn't want to go beyond that time. And you find that difficult to do as in a one shot. You set up for X number of hours or X number of time, and they don't follow along, and you have to try to figure out what to cut out and what to leave in. Is there anything specific, and make it short, because we're about ready to wrap up this segment? Was there anything you had to cut out of that adventure, or did you get to execute everything you wanted to?
The whole fight. Like, the whole dang fight. It's funny. I find my retelling of the story is ending a little bit anticlimactically, but that's actually kind of fitting, because the session itself kind of ended a bit anticlimactically, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. So, I think those both sessions turned out well.
All things told, I had a blast.
Yeah, I think it was really fun. It was one of those first successful nights that really kind of launched itself again. That made us realize that we were onto something. Each time we had the same thing. We'd look at each other when it was over and be like, wow, that was really fun. I didn't expect it to be that good. So
yeah, and I think it was after this one or I think it was this, or if not the next one, before I was finally like, all right, you got me. Like, I'm locked.
And with that, we're going to call it a wrap. It was a great show. What are we going to talk about next time?
Well, Shawn did some thinking on it, and episode 1, we were talking about how we got the game together IRL, right? Episode 3, we were talking about how we got the guild together in game. So I think for 5, we're going to talk about how we planned out this campaign now that we actually have something going. We'll talk about the story arcs we laid out, and I'm excited because we'll talk about the introduction of our villain. Thank you all again for listening to the Vanguard Chronicles podcast. If you want to read more about our adventures, don't forget to check out our wiki at vanguardguild.fandom.com. If you want to support our charity with Extra Life, go to their website and search for the Vanguard. And of course, if you want to support us, you already know the drill. Please like, please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.